Welcome to Z Time. We make apocalypse stories for survivors. Thanks for listening. On with the tale. Night didn't fall. It fractured. The city didn't go dark all at once. It blinked in pieces. One block lit the next dim. Downtown still glowing faintly in the distance, but flickering like a dying filament. I killed the interior lights on the lower floors and left only what I needed upstairs: small lamps, low wattage, powered through solar. No silhouettes in windows. No invitation. Max settled beside the third-floor window, but he didn't lie down. His weight stayed forward, ears constantly adjusting. The police scanner devolved first. Not silence. Chaos. Units overwhelmed, do not transport, bitten, repeat, do not. Static swallow the rest. Then open mic screaming. Then nothing but carrier hiss. Fire department traffic thin next. Fewer structured responses. More clipped, breathless exchanges. The TV stations cycled through the same footage again and again. Downtown intersections clogged with abandoned vehicles. Paramedics retreating from patients who suddenly turned violent. Officers firing into crowds that didn't disperse. They still avoided the word, but their eyes gave it away. Around 10:30 p.m., the first sustained gunfire erupted 3 blocks west. Not warning shots. Not controlled pairs. Panicked volleys. Mac flinched at the first crack, but didn't retreat. He shifted position closer to me, body angled toward the sound. I moved to the rooftop. The air carried smoke now. Not thick, but enough to taste. On poke, a car alarm wailed continuously until it was abruptly cut off mid-note. Further downhill, figures moved in uneven groups. Some running, some staggering, and some chasing. One man sprinted full speed up the hill, glancing over his shoulder. 2 pale figures followed him at an unnatural, relentless pace. Not fast like athletes. Fast like they didn't feel fatigue. The runner slipped on the incline. They were on him in seconds. I lowered the binoculars before it finished. Not out of denial. Out of control. You choose what you let into your head. Back inside, I secured the stairwell preemptively. The reinforced bookshelf I'd prepared was rolled into position at the second-floor choke point and locked into steel brackets, bolted into the studs earlier that afternoon. Solid. If the ground floor was compromised, vertical movement would slow dramatically. I checked every door again. Front. Locked. Reinforced. Deadbolt engaged. Back. Crossbar ready but not deployed yet. Garage. Manual slide lock set. Internal garage door. Deadbolt. Motion lights flickered twice in the backyard, triggered by movement at the fence line. On the monitor, I saw fingers curl briefly over the top edge of the cedar fencing. Testing, then withdrawing. Matt growled low and steady. Not tonight, I murmured. Just before midnight, the first blackout hit our block. It wasn't subtle. Everything cut. Streetlights dead. Houses dark. The hum of the neighborhood vanished in an instant. Only distant firelight flickered from lower elevations. The solar system transferred without interruption. Upstairs, my lamps didn't even blink. The cameras switched to night vision, grainy monochrome. And in that ghostly light, the street filled. They weren't sprinting. They weren't coordinated. But they were more numerous now, moving in erratic paths, occasionally colliding with parked cars. One stopped directly under my front camera and stared upward. Its head tilted slowly, like it sensed something above. Mac's hackles rose fully. The figure's mouth opened slightly. Then it wandered on. No awareness of doors. No attempts at handles. Not yet. Sometime after 1, the first fire started close. A house halfway down the block, windows glowing orange from within. Flames licking out from behind drawn curtains. No fire trucks responded. 2 figures stood in the yard, swaying in front of the blaze like spectators. The roof collapsed inward 30 minutes later. The sound carried up the hill like a sigh. Ash drifted faintly through the air. Mac paced. I filled every spare container with additional water from the rooftop barrels, not yet full from rainfall, but supplemented by hose transfer earlier. Fire spreads in cities like this. Wood, old framing, close quarters. The house was solid, but not immune. At 2:17 a.m., there was pounding somewhere down the street. Not my door. Further away, a man's voice shouting for help. Please, please. It moved downhill. The pounding shifted to another house, then stopped abruptly. No gunshot, no scream, just silence. That silence was worse. By 3, the gunfire had become sporadic. Individual shots. Isolated. Desperate. Then even those faded. The city didn't quiet. It changed frequency. Low moans. Distant shattering glass. The occasional metallic clang of something knocked loose. Mac finally lay down near the bedroom door. Not asleep, but conserving energy. I sat in the chair by the monitor, rifle resting across my lap, watching the feed cycle. Front yard. Backyard. Rooftop. Street. Over and over. At 4:12 a.m., a single figure stumbled into Mrs. Alvarez's yard. It paused at her front door, head cocked, then began pushing against it rhythmically. Not intelligently, just pressure. Over and over. The door held. For now, I didn't move. Intervening would mean noise. Noise would mean attention. Attention would mean numbers. And numbers win. I hated that calculation, but I made it anyway. When the first gray of dawn crept over the skyline, the city looked unfamiliar. Smoke columns rising from 3 directions. Cars abandoned mid-intersection and scattered across the streets, bodies. Some still, some not. Max stood again as the light strengthened. He looked at me, not confused, not scared, waiting. The first wave hadn't ended. It had settled, and daylight was about to show us exactly how much had changed. Dawn didn't bring relief. It brought clarity. That's worse. Darkness lets your mind negotiate. It fills gaps with possibility. Maybe what you heard wasn't what you thought. Maybe what you saw wasn't real. Daylight removes negotiation. Daylight presents facts. Mac was already at the bedroom door when I stood. He hadn't slept. Neither had I. The house was quiet in that sealed, insulated way. Solar hummed steady, refrigerator compressor cycling faintly from the second floor, wood framing settling as the temperature shifted. Everything inside was intact. Outside was something else. I slung the rifle over my shoulder, out of habit, more than necessity, and moved toward the rooftop access. Mac followed, nails clicking softly on hardwood, posture forward. The air hit different up there. Smoke hung low across the western side of the city. Not thick, but layered, multiple fires, not one. The garden was untouched. Dew clung to tomato leaves. Chickens murmured softly in their coop, unaware the world had shifted beneath them. I stepped to the parapet and raised the binoculars. Polk Street first. Cars sat at angles that made no sense, driver doors open, engines long dead. One had rolled gently into a fire hydrant and stopped there. Another rested halfway up the curb like it had tried to park and failed. Bodies lay where momentum had abandoned them. Some face down, some twisted, some missing shoes. That detail stuck with me. People lose shoes when they run hard enough, long enough. Movement caught my eye. Halfway down the block, a figure stumbled out from between 2 parked cars. Male, mid-30s, maybe, clothes dirty, shirt stiff with something dark. He swayed in place for a moment, head low, then lifted it. Even at distance, I could see the skin tone, that washed-out gray pallor. He began walking uphill, not toward anything specific, just walking. Max stood beside me, silent but rigid. He tracked the movement until the figure passed out of sight behind a row of parked vans. I shifted the binoculars further west. The house that burned overnight was a skeleton now, blackened framing exposed. Roof collapsed inward completely. Smoke still curled upward in thin strands. No responders. No containment. The fire had stopped only because it ran out of fuel. 2 figures wandered near the remains. One bumped into the fence repeatedly, like it didn't understand the barrier. No coordination. No urgency. But persistent. I swept north toward the wharf. Smoke there too. Smaller fires. Abandoned cable cars, frozen midline. One had its doors open, luggage scattered across the pavement nearby. Further still, out toward the water, everything looked calm. The bay didn't care. Alcatraz sat in the distance exactly as it had yesterday. Indifferent. Unchanged. Behind me, the rooftop camera gave a quiet click as it adjusted exposure. I lowered the binoculars and scanned with my eyes alone. My neighborhood, had lost its rhythm. No joggers. No delivery trucks. No morning commuters with coffee cups in hand. just silence punctuated by isolated motion. A woman stumbled out of a townhouse across the street I didn't recognize. She made it 3 steps before collapsing onto the sidewalk. She didn't move again. I watched for several minutes. Nothing. Then, slowly, her arm twitched. Matt growled. Low. Continuous. She rolled onto her side. Her movements were stiff. Uncoordinated, but deliberate. She pushed herself upright, stood, and began walking. Not looking at anything, just moving. I felt my stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with acceptance. This wasn't drugs. Drugs burn out. This persisted. I lowered the rifle from my shoulder and rested it against the parapet. Not aiming, just anchoring. My eyes moved to Mrs. Alvarez's house. Her front door hung partially open. One hinge broken. The porch light still on, faint in the daylight. The yard was empty. No movement inside that I could see. No sign of her. Mac followed my gaze. He whined softly. He remembered her too. I swallowed and forced myself to keep scanning. Emotion narrows awareness. Awareness keeps you alive. Further uphill, toward the crest of Nob Hill, I saw something new. A police cruiser, parked sideways across the road. Doors open. No officers visible. Driver's side door was smeared dark along the interior panel. The radio antenna bent sharply, like it had been grabbed. Behind it, 2 figures moved slowly around the vehicle. One wore part of a uniform. Mac's growl deepened. I stayed on the rooftop for over an hour, cataloging, counting, learning the new patterns. They weren't everywhere. Not yet. Movement came in singles, pairs, small clusters, aimless until interrupted, reactive, not strategic. The fences around my property remained intact, the reinforced doors untouched. The cameras showed no breach attempts overnight. The house had held. More importantly, it hadn't drawn attention. That was survival now, not strength, not dominance, absence. Mac finally relaxed just enough to sit beside me. He leaned his shoulder into my leg, grounding again. The city wasn't gone, but it wasn't San Francisco anymore. Not the one I patrolled, not the one my mother had gardened above. This was something else, something quieter, something waiting. And for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to think in longer terms. Food, secure. Water, stable, improving with rain capture. Power, solar holding. Defensive position, strong. Visibility, excellent. Isolation, intact. The townhouse wasn't just shelter. It was advantage. I rested my hand on Mac's head. We hold, I said quietly. He didn't need the words. He already knew. We'll woke to a different kind of silence. Not the hollow, waiting quiet of the night before, but something flatter, settled. The city wasn't holding its breath anymore. It had exhaled, and whatever came next was already in motion. Mac was awake too, sitting upright at the foot of the bed, ears angled toward the window. Well, didn't move right away. He listened. No sirens. That was the first thing he noticed. For 3 days, there had always been sirens. Distant, overlapping, constant. Police, ambulance, fire. Even when they faded, another would rise somewhere else. A background rhythm. Now there was nothing. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. His phone lay on the nightstand, screen dark. No overnight alerts. No new emergency notifications. No missed calls. Either things had stabilized, or they'd stopped responding. He stood, crossed the room, and lifted the corner of the blackout blanket just enough to look outside. Full daylight. Clear sky. Stillness. Max stood and stretched, nails clicking softly on the hardwood floor. Will grabbed his rifle from where it leaned beside the desk, slung it over his shoulder, and headed for the roof. The rooftop air was cool and clean. Too clean. No smoke columns rising nearby. No helicopters overhead. No movement in the immediate street below. He moved to the edge carefully and looked down. Cars were still scattered at odd angles. One had rolled halfway onto the curb. Another sat with its driver's door open. The black sedan from yesterday, the one that had hit the hydrant, was unchanged. No bodies in the open. That didn't mean anything. He scanned farther. 2 streets over, he saw motion. 3 people. They emerged cautiously from the front of a small apartment building. One man in a gray hoodie, holding what looked like a crowbar. Another older man behind him, empty hands raised slightly, scanning constantly. A woman with a backpack, clutching something tight to her chest. They moved together, not talking much, just quick glances, silent signals. They crossed the street diagonally, avoiding open areas, sticking close to parked cars. They stopped at a white SUV. The man with the crowbar smashed the rear passenger window in a single sharp motion. The sound carried cleanly. Will flinched automatically, scanning for a response. None came. No figures emerging. No movement from nearby buildings. The man reached inside, unlocked the door, and the three of them began searching the vehicle quickly. 30 seconds. Then they moved on. Disciplined. Purposeful. They weren't panicking. They were gathering. Will watched them disappear between buildings, heading west. He stayed still, rifle resting lightly in his hands. That was new. Not lone survivors running blindly. Not isolated individuals in shock. Groups. Small ones. Testing. Learning. Movement again. Closer this time. Will's eyes shifted back to his own street. Halfway down the block, the front door of a townhouse opened slowly. Not cautiously. Not carefully. It just opened. A man stepped out. Mid-30s. Office clothes. Shirt untucked. No jacket. He moved wrong. His arms hung stiffly. His head tilted slightly to one side, like his neck didn't fully support it. Will froze. The man stood on the front step for several seconds, swaying faintly. Then he walked forward. No scanning. No awareness. Just movement. His gait was uneven, one leg dragging slightly behind the other. Will's grip tightened on the rifle. The man stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Turned. Not toward anything specific. Just turned. His face came into full view. Blood dried along his jaw and neck. A dark stain covered the shoulder of his shirt. He stood there, motionless. Then he continued walking. Down the street. Alone. Will tracked him the entire time, rifle ready. The man didn't look at houses. Didn't check cars. Didn't call out. He simply moved forward, eventually disappearing around the corner. Will exhaled slowly. That was the first one he'd seen clearly in daylight. Not running. Not attacking. Just moving. Persistent. More movement farther out. A bicycle. A teenage kid pedaling hard, backpack bouncing. He weaved between stalled cars, heading north. He didn't stop. Didn't slow. Gone in seconds. Then a truck. Will stiffened. It rolled slowly down the cross street. Engine quiet. An older pickup. Faded red paint. It stopped at the intersection. 3 people inside. The driver leaned forward, scanning both directions. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, carrying a baseball bat. She moved quickly to a parked sedan, smashed the driver's window, reached inside, grabbed something. A bag. She ran back. The truck never shut off. She climbed in, door slammed, and they drove off. Efficient. Practiced. Not random. Will watched until they vanished. Survivors were adapting. Organizing. Taking what they needed while they still could. Before it was all gone, a sound behind him. Mac. The dog had moved to the roof access doorway, ears forward, low growl building in his chest. Will turned. Listened. Nothing at first. Then voices. Faint. Carrying from somewhere nearby. Will moved carefully to the opposite edge of the roof and looked down into the narrow service alley behind his building. 2 men, both carrying backpacks. One held a pistol, low at his side. They moved slowly, checking back doors, testing handles. One of them knocked lightly on a door. Waited. Knocked again. Hello, he called quietly. Anyone inside? No response. They moved on, not forcing entry. Not yet. Will stayed perfectly still. Watching. Learning. They weren't desperate. Not yet. They were mapping. Finding safe places. Supplies. Routes. The early structure of something new. Or the early collapse of everything. In the distance, a single gunshot cracked. Sharp. Echoing across the city. Mac flinched. Will didn't move. Seconds passed. Then nothing. No follow-up. Just silence again. He looked out over the rooftops. The city was still there. Buildings unchanged. Streets intact. Infrastructure standing. But the systems inside it, the invisible networks of order and response, were gone. What remained now were individuals. Small groups. Fragments. Adapting. Testing limits. Surviving. Or failing. We stayed on the roof for another hour, watching patterns emerge. Movement increased slightly as the morning progressed. People moved in short bursts, never staying exposed long, never making unnecessary noise. No authorities, no patrols, no help coming, just survivors and the others, moving slowly, persistently, growing in number. Below, his townhouse remained quiet, secured, hidden. For now, it was still a safe place. But the street was no longer empty, and whatever came next would not wait for him to be ready. Write it again in first person, I woke up to the absence of sirens. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't something I noticed fading. It was just gone. For days there had always been something. Ambulances bleeding through intersections, police units screaming down main roads, helicopters thumping overhead at all hours. Even when it quieted, something always replaced it. Now, there was nothing. Mac was already awake, sitting upright near the bedroom door, ears forward, listening to something I couldn't hear yet. I stayed still, listening with him. The house creaked faintly as always did. The low hum of my computer downstairs came through the floor. Somewhere far off, maybe miles away, a car alarm chirped once and died. But no sirens, no helicopters, no city. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. No new alerts, no emergency notifications, no missed calls. Signal was still there. Battery still good. The world still technically connected, just not responding. I swung my legs out of bed. Max stood immediately, nails clicking softly on the hardwood. All right, I murmured. Routine helped. Routine made it manageable. I grabbed the rifle from beside the desk, checked the chamber out of habit, and slung it over my shoulder. The weight was familiar now. Normal. We moved into the hallway, up the last set of stairs, and onto the roof. The air was cool. Clear. Too clear. No smoke columns rising nearby. No aircraft. No visible movement in the immediate blocks. I stepped carefully to the front edge of the roof and looked down onto my street. Cars were still scattered where people had abandoned them. One sat angled halfway onto the curb. Another had both doors open, interior exposed like something unfinished. The black sedan that had hit the hydrant 2 days ago hadn't moved. No bodies. That didn't mean anything anymore. Max stood beside me, quiet, alert. He wasn't growling. Not tense. Just watching. I scanned outward. 2 streets over, I saw movement. 3 people emerged from the front of a small apartment building. They moved cautiously, but not randomly. One guy in a gray hoodie carried a crowbar. Another older man stayed, just behind him, scanning constantly. A woman with a backpack stayed close, clutching something tight to her chest. They worked as a unit. They crossed the street diagonally, avoiding open space, moving between parked cars. They stopped beside a white SUV. The man with the crowbar smashed the rear passenger window. The sound cracked across the neighborhood. I instinctively flinched, scanning for a reaction. Movement in windows. Figures appearing. Nothing. No one came. The man reached inside, unlocked the door, and they began searching quickly. 30 seconds. Maybe less. Then they moved on. Disciplined. Focused. Efficient. They disappeared between buildings, heading west. Not panicking. Gathering. I watched the empty space where they'd been, realizing what I'd just seen. Survivors adapting. Forming groups. Learning fast. Movement closer pulled my attention back to my street. Halfway down the block, the front door of a townhouse opened. Not cautiously. Not slowly. It just opened. A man stepped out. Mid-30s maybe. Office clothes. Shirt untucked. No jacket. Something was wrong immediately. His posture was off. His arms hung too loose, too heavy. His head tilted slightly to one side, like his neck couldn't quite hold it upright. I froze, rifle coming up instinctively. He stood on the front step for several seconds, swaying faintly. Then he stepped forward. No scanning. No awareness. Just movement. His gait was uneven. One leg dragged, slightly behind the other. He reached the sidewalk and stopped. Turned. Not toward anything specific. Just turned. His face came into full view. Blood had dried along his jaw and down his neck. A dark, stiff stain covered the shoulder of his shirt. He stood there for a long moment. Then he started walking. Down the street. Not running. Not searching, just moving. I tracked him the entire time through the sights. He never looked toward my house, never reacted to anything, never showed awareness. He just moved forward. Eventually, he disappeared around the corner. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That was the first one I'd seen clearly in full daylight. Not in chaos, not in panic, just existing, still moving, more movement. Farther out this time. A kid on a bicycle shot through an intersection, pedaling hard, backpack bouncing. He weaved through stalled cars without slowing. Didn't look left or right. He was gone in seconds. Then I heard an engine. I stiffened. A pickup truck rolled slowly along the cross street. Older model. Faded red paint. Engine quiet, controlled. It stopped at the intersection. 3 people inside. The passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out holding a baseball bat. She moved fast, straight to a parked sedan. One clean swing shattered the driver's window. She reached inside, grabbed a bag, and ran back. The truck never shut off. She climbed in, and they drove away immediately. No hesitation. No wasted motion. They'd done that before. This wasn't random anymore. This was survival becoming routine. Max shifted behind me. A low, quiet growl vibrated in his chest. I turned, listened. At first, nothing. Then voices. Faint. Behind the building. I moved carefully to the rear edge of the roof and looked down into the service alley. 2 men moved slowly along the back entrances. Both carried backpacks. One held a pistol loosely at his side. They checked doors, tested handles. One knocked softly on a door. Waited. Knocked again. Hello, he called quietly. Anyone inside? No answer. They exchanged a look and moved on. Not forcing entry. Not yet. They weren't desperate. They were mapping. Learning what was occupied. What wasn't. What was worth coming back to. I stayed perfectly still until they disappeared. A single gunshot cracked somewhere in the distance. Sharp. Clean. Echoing across the city. Mac flinched. I didn't. I just listened. Nothing followed. No sirens. No response. Just silence swallowing it whole. I stood there a long time after that, scanning rooftops, streets, intersections. Movement existed now. Small. Controlled. Careful. People emerging in fragments. Testing the world. Finding each other. Or finding the things that used to be people. The city itself looked unchanged. Buildings still stood. Roads still connected everything. Infrastructure remained intact. But the systems inside it, the things that made it function, were gone. No police. No fire. No structure. Just survivors. And the others. Still moving. Still appearing. Still growing. Below me, my townhouse sat quiet and secured. Invisible for now. But the street wasn't empty anymore. And whatever this was, it was no longer the beginning. The house was quiet when I came back downstairs. Not peaceful, just quiet in the way a place becomes when it's cut off from the world. I sat at the desk in my bedroom command post, the rifle leaning against the wall within arm's reach, and turned the television on. Every channel was the same story told in slightly different voices. A news anchor in New York sat behind a desk that looked too large for her now, her hands folded tightly, her eyes red from either exhaustion or crying. Federal authorities are urging citizens to remain indoors. The footage behind her showed streets I knew well. Manhattan, empty except for abandoned taxis and smoke drifting between buildings. The broadcast cut abruptly to shaky phone video. Someone filming from inside an apartment. A man outside in the hallway, pounding against a neighbor's door with his bare hands. His movements were violent but uncoordinated. The anchor came back, voice strained. These attacks appeared to be connected to the neurological condition first reported earlier this week. Condition. They were still calling it that. The screen flickered. Signal degraded. Then froze entirely. I switched channels. Los Angeles. Same story. Chicago. Same story. Sacramento. Brief aerial footage of traffic locked solid on I-80. Cars abandoned in every direction. Then static. I turned the television off. Silence filled the room again. Mac lay beside the desk, watching me, waiting for whatever came next. I turned to the computer. Internet still worked, barely. I opened Reddit first. The front page was frozen in time. Posts from hours ago. Maybe longer. National Guard firing on infected in Houston. Hospital collapse in Atlanta. Do not let them bite you. No new comments. No new updates. Just ghosts of conversations that had stopped mid-sentence. I opened X next. Videos loaded slowly. Phone footage from rooftops. From moving cars. From inside barricaded homes. Screaming. Running. People attacking each other. Not fights. Feeding. I closed the browser. Sat there. Listening to nothing. I reached over and switched on the ham radio. Static filled the speaker. Then fragments. Unit down, don't engage, fall back, fall silence again. No call signs I recognized. No structure. No command. Just pieces of something that had already broken. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. 53 years old. 30 of those spent believing there was always someone coming. Backup. Reinforcements. A system behind you. Now there wasn't. Just me. And Mac. I sat there for a long time. Then I said out loud, "Fuck it." Mac's ears perked slightly. I stood. If this was the end of things, if the world outside my walls was collapsing piece by piece, I wasn't going to spend every second hiding from it. Not yet. Cold air rolled out of the chest freezer when I opened it. Venison backstrap, vacuum sealed. From a hunt Rick and I had done 2 winters ago. Clean kill. Clean meat. I took one package out and closed the lid. Mac watched the entire process closely, tail low but moving. He knew. He always knew. The rooftop was perfect. Blue sky stretched clean and endless above San Francisco. The air carried that cool Pacific edge, just enough to keep the heat comfortable. I filled the Weber charcoal grill, lit the coals, watched the flames catch slowly, deliberately. Mac lay beside the garden beds, head resting on his paws, watching everything. The city spread around us, quiet and broken and beautiful. I seasoned the venison simply. Salt, pepper, a little garlic powder. Didn't rush it. Didn't need to. I sat back in one of the old patio chairs my mother used to love, opened a beer, and took a slow drink. The sound of the can opening seemed louder than it should have been. Mac lifted his head, relaxed again. I let the meat cook low and slow, turning it carefully, letting the smoke do its work. For a while, I let myself pretend. Ended up drinking 6 beers in the next few hours. Soaking up the sun. I felt almost happy. Pretend it was just another Saturday. Pretend the city below wasn't dying. Pretend this wasn't the last time I might ever do something normal. Mac got the first slice when it was done. He took it gently, as he always had, and settled beside me to chew it slowly, savoring it. We sat there together, man and dog, watching the end of the world under a perfect sky. The voices came mid-afternoon. "Hey!" Mac's head snapped up instantly. His body stiffened. I stood slowly and moved to the front edge of the roof. For people stood in the street below. 3 men, 1 woman. They looked exhausted, dirty, clothes stained and worn. But their eyes were sharp, focused, locked onto me. "You up there," one of the men shouted. I didn't answer. "We can see you," he called. "We know you're there." Mac growled beside me. "Low. Dangerous." The woman stepped forward. "Please," she called. "We just need help." Her voice was hoarse. "We haven't eaten." Behind her, one of the men stared up at the grill, at the meat, at the house. Calculating. "You got food," he said. Not a question, a statement. I stayed silent. The first man stepped closer to the front gate. "You're secure up there," he called. "We can help you. Protect the place. We just need inside." Mac's growl deepened. I spoke finally. "No." The word hung in the air between us. Their expressions hardened instantly. "You serious?" the man called. "Yes." Silence. Then anger. "You just let people die," another shouted. I didn't answer. The first man's face twisted. "You don't get to sit up there like a king while everyone else starves." I rested my hand casually on the rifle slung over my shoulder. Not aiming, just visible. His eyes tracked it immediately. He understood. His voice dropped. "We'll remember this." The woman stared at me. Not angry, just empty. "You'll regret it," one of the others said. They backed away slowly, never turning their backs fully. Then they disappeared down the street. Gone. Matt kept growling long after they were out of sight. I stayed there, watching, listening, and then I heard it. A new sound. Movement. Slow. Uneven. At the far end of the street. A figure emerged. Then another, drawn by the voices. drawn by the noise, drawn by us. They moved into the open, aimless, searching. Mac's growl became a warning rumble in his chest. More appeared, not running, just coming. I looked at the grill, the smoke rising into the clear sky, the smell drifting outward. I understood now. Sound drew them. Movement drew them. Maybe smell did too. And I just broadcast my presence to everything nearby. The survivors have been the first problem. These things were the second. I closed the grill lid slowly, cutting the smoke. The rooftop didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt exposed. Mac pressed close to my leg, watching the street. Waiting, just like I was. They were learning. And now so was I. The radio chatter changed overnight. It wasn't panic anymore. It was structure. Not official structure. Not police. Not fire. Something else. I sat at the desk with the ham radio speaker, turned up low. Mac asleep beside the chair, his ears still twitching at every unfamiliar sound. A man's voice came through, calm and controlled. Any able-bodied personnel in the Mission District respond on Channel 47. We are establishing perimeter control. Non-compliant individuals will be treated as hostile. Personnel, not civilians, not survivors. Personnel. Another voice broke in. We warned them. They refused to surrender supplies. This is no longer voluntary. This is necessary. Then static. I leaned forward, adjusting the dial carefully. A different frequency. More voices. Different group. Different tone. They took everything. Food, water, medicine. They said they were securing it for redistribution. They lied. A pause. Then quietly. They left us nothing. Mac lifted his head slightly, sensing my tension. Groups were forming. Organizing. Claiming territory. And they weren't asking permission. I switched the radio off. Sat there in silence. The city wasn't just collapsing. It was reorganizing into something else. Something older. More primitive. More honest. Power belonged to whoever could hold it. I took the rifle upstairs. Mac followed, already knowing where we were going. The rooftop felt different now. Not a garden. Not a place to relax. An overwatch position. I stepped to the edge and raised the rifle, scanning through the scope. Movement existed everywhere now, if you knew how to look. Not crowds. Fragments. Individuals. Pairs. Groups. Some moved carefully, quietly, trying to stay alive. Others moved openly. Confident. Predatory. 2 blocks south, I saw one of the things again. It shuffled into the intersection, dragging its right leg. Blood covered its shirt, black and dried. It turned slowly, as if listening. A man appeared on the opposite sidewalk. He froze when he saw it. They stared at each other. The man backed away slowly. The thing moved toward him. Faster now. The man turned and ran. It followed. Not fast, but relentless. The man stumbled. Fell. Scrambled backward on his hands. Screaming. The thing reached him. Dropped on top of him. I didn't think. The rifle was already steady. Center mass. I squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the city. The thing jerked violently. Fell sideways. The man shoved it off and scrambled away, running without looking back. I kept the scope on the body. It lay still for a moment. Then it moved again. My stomach dropped. It pushed itself upright. Unsteady, but functional. The round had hit its chest. It didn't matter. I adjusted the scope. Aim higher. Head. Squeezed. The second shot snapped its head backward. It collapsed instantly. Didn't move again. I watched for 30 seconds. Nothing. That was it. Headshots. It wasn't theory anymore. It was fact. Mac looked up at me. He understood the tone of the rifle. The difference between warning and killing. I exhaled slowly. I just fired a rifle in open daylight. And I didn't care who heard it. More appeared over the next hour. Drawn by sound. Drawn by movement. Drawn by whatever instinct drove them now. They wandered into my block one by one, and I shot them. Each time clean, precise, head, down, still. I worked methodically. No wasted rounds. No panic. Just execution. Below, I began to notice something else. People were watching. From windows. From behind cars. From doorways. They saw the bodies drop. They saw where the shots came from. They saw that someone up here was protecting the street. Not hunting them. Protecting them. The realization settled into me slowly. This house, this position, this elevation, this visibility. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was Overwatch. And for the first time since this began, I understood exactly what that meant. The decision didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel heroic. It felt obvious. I went back downstairs, sat at the desk, turned on the ham radio, switched to an open frequency, held the transmit button. For a moment, I just listened to the static. Then I spoke. My name is Powell. My voice sounded calm, steady, stronger than I felt. I live in Nob Hill, 3-story townhouse with rooftop visibility in all directions. I paused. This is a message to anyone within radio range. Max sat beside me, watching. I am armed with scoped rifles, semi-automatic weapons, and sufficient ammunition. I let the words settle. I have full visual coverage of my surrounding streets. Another pause. If you are a survivor being threatened, harmed, or coerced by hostile individuals, move into open streets. My finger tightened slightly on the transmit button. I will observe. I swallowed. If I see anyone attacking innocent people, they will receive one warning. Silence. Then, if they do not comply, I will shoot them. The words didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a promise. I continued. If I see any of the infected approaching survivors, I will engage and neutralize them. I leaned closer to the microphone. I'm not part of any group. I am not claiming territory. I looked out the window toward the rooftop stairs. I am protecting my neighborhood. I released the transmit button. Static filled the room again. Max stared at me, waiting. I sat there for a long moment, then stood, picked up the rifle, and went back to the roof. The city stretched around me, broken, dangerous, full of predators, human and otherwise. But now there was something else here too. A man on a rooftop, watching, protecting, and no longer hiding. I took the rifle upstairs. Mac followed, already knowing where we were going. The rooftop felt different now. Not a garden, not a place to relax. An overwatch position. I stepped to the edge and raised the rifle, scanning through the scope. Movement existed everywhere now, if you knew how to look. Not crowds, fragments, individuals, pairs, groups. Some moved carefully, quietly, trying to stay alive. Others moved openly, confident, predatory. 2 blocks south, I saw one of the things again. It shuffled into the intersection, dragging its right leg. Blood covered its shirt, black and dried. It turned slowly, as if listening. A man appeared on the opposite sidewalk. He froze when he saw it. They stared at each other. The man backed away slowly. The thing moved toward him. Faster now. The man turned and ran. It followed. Not fast, but relentless. The man stumbled, fell, scrambled backward on his hands. Screaming. The thing reached him, dropped on top of him. I didn't think. The rifle was already steady. Center mass. I squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the city. The thing jerked violently, fell sideways. The man shoved it off and scrambled away, running without looking back. I kept the scope on the body. It lay still for a moment. Then it moved again. My stomach dropped. It pushed itself upright. Unsteady, but functional. The round had hit its chest. It didn't matter. I adjusted the scope. Aim higher. Head. Squeezed. The second shot snapped its head backward. It collapsed instantly. Didn't move again. I watched for 30 seconds. Nothing. That was it. Headshots. It wasn't theory anymore. It was fact. Mac looked up at me. He understood the tone of the rifle. The difference between warning and killing. I exhaled slowly. I just fired a rifle in open daylight. And I didn't care who heard it. More appeared over the next hour. Drawn by sound. Drawn by movement. Drawn by whatever instinct drove them now. They wandered into my block one by one. And I shot them. Each time clean. Precise. Head. Down. Still. I worked methodically. No wasted rounds. No panic. Just execution. Below, I began to notice something else. People were watching. From windows. From behind cars. From doorways. They saw the bodies drop. They saw where the shots came from. They saw that someone up here was protecting the street. Not hunting them. Protecting them. The realization settled into me slowly. This house. This position. This elevation. This visibility. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was Overwatch. And for the first time since this began, I understood exactly what that meant. The decision didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel heroic. It felt obvious. I went back downstairs, sat at the desk, turned on the ham radio, switched to an open frequency, held the transmit button. For a moment, I just listened to the static. Then I spoke. My name is Will Powell. My voice sounded calm, steady, stronger than I felt. I live in Nob Hill, 3-story townhouse with rooftop visibility in all directions. I paused. This is a message to anyone within radio range. Max sat beside me, watching. I am armed with scoped rifles, semi-automatic weapons, and sufficient ammunition. I'll let the words settle. I have full visual coverage of my surrounding streets. Another pause. If you're a survivor being threatened, harmed, or coerced by hostile individuals, move into open streets. My finger tightened slightly on the transmit button. I will observe. I swallowed. If I see anyone attacking innocent people, they will receive one warning. Silence. Then, if they do not comply, I will shoot them. The words didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a promise. I continued. If I see any of the infected approaching survivors, I will engage and neutralize them. I leaned closer to the microphone. I'm not part of any group. I am not claiming territory. I looked out the window toward the rooftop stairs. I am protecting my neighborhood. I released the transmit button. Static filled the room again. Max stared at me, waiting. I sat there for a long moment, then stood, picked up the rifle, and went back to the roof. The city stretched around me, broken, dangerous, full of predators, human and otherwise. But now there was something else here too. A man on a rooftop, watching, protecting, and no longer hiding. The sound pulled me out of sleep before my eyes even opened. Pressure, not loud, not sudden, constant. Mac was already on his feet beside the bed, his entire body rigid, ears forward, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. I lay still for half a second, listening. A new sound layered itself into the silence. A wet, uneven chorus. Moaning. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the rifle and moved for the stairs, Mac glued to my side. Up to the roof first. Always the roof. The moment I pushed through the door and stepped into the morning air, I saw them. They filled the street. Dozens. Pressed against the front of the townhouse. Against the garage door. Against the front windows. More crowded the rear fence. Their bodies pushing against the wood slats. Fingers clawing through the gaps. Jaws working uselessly at the air. The sound was constant. Moaning. Hungry. Relentless. Mac barked once, sharp and furious. I turned slowly in a full circle. They were everywhere. Not hundreds, but enough. 50, maybe more. All drawn here. By the rifle shots. By the voices. By the chickens. By me. One slammed its shoulder against the front door below. Another pushed into it. Another. The structure groaned faintly. A deep, stress creak that I felt through the soles of my feet. My house. My fortress. Under pressure. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Think. Panic killed people faster than bullets ever did. They weren't coordinated. They weren't intelligent. Just pressure. Just instinct. But pressure, over time, broke anything. Even castles. Mac growled continuously beside me, pacing the roof edge. I turned and went downstairs fast. Not running. Moving with purpose. Down to the stairwell between the second and third floors. My barricade waited there. The heavy bookshelf already positioned across the stair opening. The reinforced desk behind it. The steel brackets I'd installed anchoring them to the wall studs. It was good, but it wasn't permanent. I grabbed the additional lumber I'd stacked nearby. 2x4s. Cut lengths. I worked quickly, screwing horizontal braces into the wall studs across the stairwell entrance, creating a frame that would hold the furniture in place even if pressure forced it inward. My hands moved automatically. Measure. Drive screw. Anchor. Reinforce. Sweat rolled down my back despite the cool air. Max stood at the top of the stairs, watching below, guarding while I worked. The house creaked again. Not failure. Stress. Testing. I stood and looked at what I'd built. If they got through the doors. If they got through the windows. If the ground floor fell. This would hold. Long enough. Long enough for me to end it on my terms. But I didn't want that. Not yet. I went back upstairs. Back to the radio. Switched it on. Voices were already there. Will you copy? A woman's voice. I grabbed the mic. I copy. Immediate response. We can see them from here. They're packed around your block. Another voice broke in. They're drawn to you. I didn't need confirmation. I know. Static. Then, we can help. I froze. Help. Real help. Not threats. Not demands. Help. A man's voice came through, older. They follow sound. We've tested it. I leaned forward. Go on. If we create noise away from your house, we can pull them off. Another voice joined. We've been using bottles. Glass. Throw them down intersections. The breaking sound pulls them. I pictured it immediately. Sound as bait. Sound as a weapon. It made sense. They won't all go, I said. No, the man agreed. But enough. Another voice spoke, younger. We've been making spears. I blinked. What? Broom handles. Metal rods. Sharpened ends. A pause. You can put them down quietly. One at a time. Through the head. My chest tightened. Not from fear. From something else. Coordination. Strategy. Community. They weren't just surviving. They were adapting. Working together. I pressed the transmit button. Who's involved? Static. Then, your neighbors, Will. I closed my eyes briefly. Neighbors. Not strangers. Not factions. Neighbors. People who lived here. Who belonged here. I keyed the mic again. Okay, I said. My voice was steady. We do it together. Mac watched me, ears forward. Listening. Believing. Outside, the moaning continued. Bodies pressed against my walls. Testing my defenses. But now I wasn't alone. Glass shattered somewhere down the block. Sharp. Violent. Distinct. Several heads below snapped toward the sound instantly. Another bottle shattered farther away. More heads turned. Bodies shifted. Movement began. Slow at first. Then more. The pressure against my fence eased slightly. Mac's growl softened. Hope. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was there. For the first time since this began, this wasn't just survival. It was resistance. It was people standing together. Fighting back. Building something new. A community. And I was part of it. The radio crackled at my side. You seeing this, Will? It was the older man. Calm voice. Steady. I see it, I said. Another bottle broke. Farther still. The horde stretched now, no longer concentrated. No longer a solid mass. A trail. A current flowing away from my home. I watched the move. Watched the threat physically drain from my block. Minutes passed. 10. 20. Each new crash pulled more of them away. Some wandered aimlessly once the sound stopped, but they weren't pressing against my defenses anymore. They weren't testing my walls. They weren't trying to get in. The street in front of my townhouse began to open. Empty space appeared where bodies had been stacked shoulder to shoulder less than an hour ago. The relief didn't hit all at once. It came slowly, like circulation returning to a limb. I lowered the rifle slightly. Mac relaxed beside me, though his eyes never stopped scanning. Eventually, only a handful remained. Isolated, separated, manageable. One lingered in the middle of the street, swaying slightly, as if unsure where to go now that the noise had moved beyond its range. I raised the rifle, centered the scope, fired. It dropped instantly. The sound echoed, but not enough to rebuild the horde. Not enough to undo what had been accomplished. The radio crackled again. We're pulling back now, the older man said. I keyed the mic copy. A pause. Then I said it. Thank you. Simple. Honest. More voices joined. We've got you, Will. You're not alone. None of us are. I stood there on the rooftop, the morning sun warming my face, my house still standing beneath my feet. Still holding. Still mine. Still ours. Below me, the street was no longer drowning in bodies. It was quiet again. Not safe. Not normal. But defended. Protected. Earned. Mac leaned gently into my leg. And for the first time since I'd woken to that nightmare, I allowed myself to believe something dangerous. We might actually survive this. The street stayed quiet long after the last of them drifted away. Quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. Quiet in a way that felt held. I stood on the rooftop, rifle resting against my shoulder, Max sitting beside me, both of us watching over Nob Hill like we had every hour for the past few days. But now when I looked out, I didn't just see buildings. I saw people. Not directly, not always visible, but I knew where they were. Peter, 2 houses down. Accountant, mid-40s, lived alone, nervous hands, but he'd thrown bottles without hesitation to help me. He'd risked drawing attention to himself for someone else. Maria and Luis around the corner. Their daughter Sophia, 8 years old, who had waved at Mac like none of this had broken her yet. Luis had been the one lowering spears out his own window, carefully, methodically, finishing the stragglers when it was safe. Eleanor across the intersection. 67, retired nurse. Her voice had been the calm one on the radio when my house was surrounded. She'd been the one coordinating, directing, keeping everyone steady. Daniel, former contractor, lived in the gray townhouse with the cracked stone steps. He'd been the one smashing the bottles, throwing them farther than anyone else, pulling the hoard away piece by piece. And Thomas, younger, maybe 30, quiet voice on the radio, said very little, but always listened, always responded when needed. They weren't soldiers. They weren't militia. They were people who had stayed. People who had chosen not to become predators. People who had chosen to stand together. And they'd chosen to stand with me. I hadn't asked them to follow. I hadn't ordered them. I just acted. And they'd answered. Mac leaned gently into my leg. They trust us, I said quietly. His ears flicked. They trust me. That realization carried weight. Not pride. Responsibility. A sound broke the air below. Not glass breaking. Not quite. A dull, heavy impact. Thud. Mac's head snapped toward the front of the house instantly. So did mine. Thud. Wood splintered. Then crash. Glass exploded inward. The bay window. Ground floor. Front salon. My stomach dropped. They'd waited. Waited until the horde cleared. Waited until the noise stopped. Waited until I relaxed. Militia. I moved instantly. Stay, I told Max sharply. He froze in place, watching me descend the rooftop stairs. I moved fast but controlled, rifle ready, descending to the 3rd floor landing. Another crash echoed below. Wood breaking. Boots stepping through shattered glass. Voices. Low. Focused. Move. There's the stairwell. Watch your angles. 6. No. 7 voices. Armed. Disciplined. They knew what they were doing. I reached the barricade. My barricade. The reinforced choke point between the 2nd and 3rd floors. The heavy bookshelf anchored into the studs. The desk braced behind it. The horizontal lumber supports, locking everything into place. Below it, the stairwell dropped into the 2nd floor. Below that, into the salon where they'd entered. I positioned myself behind the barricade, rifle barrel resting in the narrow gap I'd intentionally left for firing. Breathing slow, controlled. Footsteps entered the 2nd floor. Careful, measured. They're up there, one whispered. Another voice. He's boxed himself in. A 3rd voice. Flush him out. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't reveal position. One of them stepped into the stairwell below. I saw the top of his head first. Helmet. Then his rifle. Shotgun. He started up the stairs cautiously. 1 step. 2. 3. I centered the scope on his face. Squeezed. The rifle cracked. His head snapped backward violently. His body collapsed instantly, tumbling down the stairs into the man behind him. Shouting erupted. Contact! He's got overwatch. They scrambled backward, panic entering their voices. I chambered the next round smoothly. Another appeared briefly, firing blindly upward. Pellets blasted into the ceiling above me, splintering wood, sending dust into the air. I leaned slightly. Fired. He dropped mid-step. His rifle clattered down the stairs. The others retreated fully into the 2nd floor. Shouting now. Panicked. Where is he? I can't see him. He's behind something. Of course I was. That was the point. That was why I'd built it. I spoke calmly. You should leave. Silence fell below. Heavy breathing. One of them shouted back. You think you can hold this forever? I didn't answer. Another voice. Push him. Footsteps rushed the stairs. 2 at once this time. Desperation. Aggression. I fired. First one dropped instantly. Second froze in shock. That hesitation killed him. I fired again. He collapsed across the first body. The stairwell filled with smoke and the metallic scent of blood. Below, chaos. He's got elevation. He's fortified. Fall back. Another voice, angrier. No. Push him. He rushed the stairs alone. Brave. Stupid. I waited until his chest cleared the railing. Then fired. He fell without a sound. Silence followed. Long, heavy. Broken only by the settling of bodies on the staircase. Then movement. Retreat. Boots moving fast. Desperate now. One of them shouted. Fall back. Another voice, shaking. He's picking us off. A final voice screamed upward. This isn't over. Then they ran. Out the broken bay window. Gone. I stayed in position. Didn't chase. Didn't expose myself. Waited. Listened. Nothing. They were gone. For now. Mac appeared silently beside me, pressing against my leg. The barricade had held, exactly as designed. Below us, 5 bodies lay broken in the stairwell. 2 more had escaped. Alive. Learning. Adapting. Returning later. The front of my house stood open now. The bay window shattered. The salon exposed to the street. A wound in my fortress. I rested my hand on Mac's head. It started, I said quietly. He didn't move. Outside, faint in the distance, came a sound I knew too well. Moaning, drawn by gunfire, drawn by blood, drawn by the open wound in my home. The next wave was already coming. They came back the way water returns to a cracked hull. Slow at first. One stumbled through the shattered remains of the bay window, its shoulder catching on the jagged frame before it dragged itself inside. Its movements were clumsy, its balance uncertain, but it didn't stop. It couldn't stop. Behind it, another, then another, drawn by the rifle shots, drawn by the shouting, drawn by the smell of fresh blood cooling in the stairwell below me. Max stood rigid at my side, every muscle tight, his lips curled back just enough to show teeth. The barricade held firm in front of us, the heavy furniture and anchored lumber forming a hard boundary between my position and the second floor below. I stepped closer to the firing gap and looked down. They were already inside the salon, shambling across the hardwood floors my mother had polished every Sunday morning for 20 years. One tripped over an overturned chair. Another dragged its hand along the wall, leaving a dark streak behind. They didn't rush. They didn't coordinate. They just came, and they would keep coming, because that's what they did now. That's what they were. I didn't fire yet. Not until they reached the staircase. Not until they tried to climb. I had time. For now. Mac leaned gently into my leg, never taking his eyes off the movement below. I rested my hand on his neck, and for a moment, I let myself think. Not about the next shot, not about the next threat, about what came after. Because there would be an after. There had to be. This townhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was elevation, visibility, defensibility, 3 stories of vertical advantage, reinforced choke points, solar power, stored food, water, the garden still growing above us, chickens still laying eggs, Max still breathing beside me. Everything my mother had built here, everything my father had left behind, everything I had come back to. This wasn't just a house. It was a position, a foundation, a legacy, and now it was a stronghold. The reality was simple. I wasn't leaving. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Maybe not ever. I would hold here. Hold the high ground. Protect what could be protected. Kill what needed to be killed. Because there was no avoiding it. Not anymore. The infected weren't going away. The hostile survivors weren't going away. The world had shifted permanently. This was it now. But something else had started too. Something quieter. Stronger. People had answered the radio. People had thrown bottles to save my home. People had trusted me. Peter, Maria, Luis, Eleanor, Daniel, Thomas. Neighbors. Not soldiers. Not militia. Not predators. People. And people could build. People could adapt. People could form something new. The thought settled into place slowly. Carefully. What if they came here? Not just to help from a distance, but to stay. This house could hold more than just me. The second floor bedrooms were still intact. The third floor had space. The rooftop could grow more food if I expanded the garden beds. Water collection could be increased. Solar capacity could be expanded. Barricades strengthened. Rotations established. Lookouts. Structure. Community. It would mean less space. More mouths. More risk. More responsibility. But it would also mean more eyes. More hands. More strength. More life. Max shifted beside me. I looked down at him. What do you think? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. He was already committed. He always had been. The future wouldn't look like the past. It wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be safe. But it could be built. Piece by piece. Person by person. Starting here. Starting now. A sound below snapped me back to the present. One of them had reached the staircase. It placed its foot on the first step. Then another. It climbed slowly, clumsily, but deliberately. Its ruined eyes fixed upward. Toward me. Toward us. I raised the rifle. Centered the scope. Squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the house. It dropped instantly, collapsing backward into the others below. Another step forward. Then another. Relentless. I chambered the next round. Steady. Calm. This was the reality now. Hold the house. Protect the living. And the dead. Mac pressed against my leg as the rifle spoke again. And again. And again. Outside, the city waited. Inside, we endured. And above it all, in the house where I'd grown up, in the last place left that still meant something, we held the line. That's it for today's story. We would love to see you again soon. But most importantly, stay safe out there.